Breaking news, the kind of news that no country or community ever wants to hear. Once characterized as a desperate search for a kidnapped child, the case of 7-month-old Emmanuel Haro has taken a tragic turn. We are not discussing strangers in parking lots or enigmatic kidnappers in the dark tonight. We are talking about Emmanuel's own parents, who are currently at the center of an unforgivable and devastating betrayal. Rebecca Haro, Emmanuel's mother, has confessed behind the chilly bars of a prison cell. The same woman who claimed to have been attacked and that her baby had been stolen when she first appeared on camera with a black eye is now vulnerable due to her statements. Despite her claims of innocence, her confession is more potent than her entreaties. Then there's Jake, Emmanuel's father, who doesn't stand tall as a guardian but instead walks in handcuffs and shackles while detectives follow him around. He's not in charge of a rescue. He is in charge of a search team that is trying to locate his son's body. Take a moment to visualize this: a father bending forward in an orange jumpsuit, pointing to the ground where officers mark the dirt and cadaver dogs sniff it. Parents who are trying to bring their child home alive do not act in this way. Two individuals are accused of knowing the precise location of his tiny body's resting place. What kind of mother provides birth to a child only to conceal that life behind lies? What sort of father leads detectives to the grave where his son might lie? Such conduct goes beyond simply being a crime against children. Such an act is the cruelest and most personal form of betrayal. There was never any chance for Emmanuel. Emmanuel was never given an option. He relied on their protection, love, and arms. Instead, he encountered death, deceit, and silence. Thus, the focus changes tonight. Once calling for the nation's sympathy, the parents are now accused of doing something unimaginable. Saving a life is no longer the goal of the hunt for Emmanuel. Recovering what remains of it is the goal. However, this case is still pending resolution. Every discovery, search, and court hearing reveals darker facts about a family that the world once felt sorry for. One thing also becomes evident as we follow this historic case: Emmanuel's justice cannot and must not be forgotten. Subscribe and enable notifications if you think Emmanuel should be remembered and if you think his story should be told all the way through. Since the pursuit of truth is still ongoing, we won't give up until all the facts are known. It began with a tale that initially seemed too tragic to be questioned. In the parking lot of a Big 5 sporting goods store in Yucaipa, California, Rebecca Haro stood in front of cameras and police, claiming that her baby had been taken from her arms. She depicted the scene as though it were part of a crime drama. She claimed to be getting ready to change Emmanuel's diaper as she got out of her car. Then she heard a voice, a single word: "Hola." She said she turned, startled, and was hit before she could respond. She recalled falling to the ground. When she opened her eyes again, she reported that her baby boy was gone, recalling the sting of pain and the world spinning. Rebecca revealed her face to the cameras. She indicated the bruise that appeared to be proof that she had been attacked, as well as the severe swelling surrounding her eye. As she talked about regaining consciousness while gazing at the empty spot where Emmanuel should have been, her voice faltered. Her performance was meticulously crafted to evoke strong emotions in the audience. And she was believed. Emmanuel's picture went viral on social media in a matter of hours. With candles in hand, neighbors gathered and prayed into the night sky. To keep their eyes open, volunteers banded together. Rebecca wasn't a suspect for a while. She was a mother in mourning. Her tears became the tears of the country. Her story became the story of the country. However, detectives quietly standing in the background noticed something that the general public did not. No witnesses heard the struggle. No customers remember the cries of a mother whose child had just been abducted. There's no surveillance footage of a suspicious car driving off. Despite Rebecca's dramatic claims, there was no supporting evidence to substantiate them. As a result, investigators began to doubt her, while strangers cried out for her. Line by line, they reenacted her story. And each time, the specifics changed just enough to raise suspicion. How could there be so many people in a busy parking lot and nobody notices a baby being stolen during the day? How is it possible for an attack to leave such handy wounds without revealing anything about the perpetrator? Although Rebecca claimed to have been caught off guard, investigators were already posing a more sinister query: was she telling the truth at all? Or had this story been deliberately written to conceal the truth about what had happened to her child, rather than to save him? The community initially held on to Rebecca's story. Detectives, however, were unable to do so. The contradictions were too apparent to overlook. Where were the witnesses if a mother was attacked in the middle of the day? The town of Yucaipa is not a ghost town. Customers came and went. Workers came and went from the store. However, nobody claimed to have seen Rebecca sprawled out on the asphalt. No onlooker witnessed Emmanuel being carried away. A getaway car, a license plate, a direction of travel, or something else should have been present if there had been a kidnapping. However, investigators searched through street views, parking lot cameras, and surveillance footage from surrounding businesses. Nothing was present. No car. Not a suspicious person. No sign of the supposed kidnapper. Then came the question that nobody dared to ask aloud: where was Emmanuel if this kidnapping had never taken place? Digital evidence, the silent witness that rarely lies, was used by detectives, including movement tracking, call logs, and cell phone data. Rebecca's digital footprint did not align with the timeline she provided to reporters. The total number of hours was 0. The places weren't the same. Under the harsh, exact reality of technology, the narrative she spoke was coming apart. The focus turned to Jake Haro as suspicions grew. He was just another father hoping for his son's return to the outside world. Court documents, however, held a different tale waiting to unravel. Jake had been found guilty of intentional child cruelty in 2023, just 2 years before Emmanuel's disappearance. He had cared for another child who had suffered harm. Another family had already witnessed his potential for harm. Prosecutors were unable to ignore the red flag, which abruptly increased the danger of Emmanuel's case. Then, the most devastating blow of all, Child Protective Services intervened. After seeing enough, investigators determined that the Haros' 2-year-old daughter could no longer live in that house. Silently, they took her away and put her in safety. It served as a silent warning to the neighborhood that something dangerous was happening behind the Haros walls. What should have been a home full of safety and lullabies was now suspected of violence and death. At that point, the compassion that had previously surrounded Rebecca started to fade. Her shaky, camera-ready voice no longer sounded practiced. Her bruised eye appeared to be the cover story of a liar rather than the mark of a victim. Like a noose around the parents who once sought the sympathy of the entire world, the investigation was tightening. Their story's foundation gradually crumbled, leaving only one possibility: Emmanuel's fate was unrelated to random people in parking lots. It was all about the 2 people he trusted the most. Rebecca's story had become riddled with holes by the end of August. Detectives were no longer searching parking lots for shadows. The horror within her house was right before them. The case changed forever on August 22nd. Jake and Rebecca were both taken into custody on suspicion of murder. The parents who had once pleaded for assistance were taken away in handcuffs, their faces now representing suspicion rather than grief, and the country watched in disbelief. Rebecca tried to stick to the story she had made up inside the jailhouse walls. She presented herself to reporters as a victim, claiming that someone else was to blame, that she had been knocked unconscious, and that she was still looking for her child. Her words mirrored the frantic screams of a mother who had been wronged. But behind closed doors, her performance started to falter under the constant pressure of the detectives' questions. Rebecca was aware that lies cannot stand up when there is proof. Before she finally broke, one question led to another, and then another. Rebecca came clean. In an instant, the foundation of her public narrative fell apart. She revealed information that destroyed the abduction story she had so fervently maintained. She showed herself as a woman prepared to lie to a country to hide the truth, rather than as a mother who stood up for her child. Nevertheless, she held on to one final lie, that Jake was innocent even during confession. She referred to him as a good father. He would never harm a baby, she insisted. Even as investigators detailed his history of child abuse, even as he sat in a jumpsuit, accompanied by detectives, to look for the body of the son he was meant to protect, she said those words. It was a bitterly ironic moment. A mother chooses to protect the man beside her, even after finally acknowledging her role in a nightmare. Thus, the eerie question remains, how many times do we have to listen to a parent claim innocence while their child's voice is silenced for all time? How many justifications can overcome the fact that Emmanuel was never given an option? He was speechless. He was unable to run. He failed to protect himself. His parents were all he had. And it was they who had betrayed him. The hunt for Emmanuel turned into a somber ritual a few days after the arrest. It is now a recovery mission for his remains rather than a search for a missing child. His father was at the heart of it all. Jake Haro was led into the desolate fields of Moreno Valley while wearing an orange jail jumpsuit and shackled at the wrists and ankles. Jake walked with his head down, his chains rattling with each step, surrounded by detectives and the silent weight of cadaver dogs sniffing the dry ground. Detectives thought Emmanuel might be buried in the patches of dirt indicated by the same hands that had once held his newborn. A father reduced to a guide in the hunt for his own child's body was a terrifying sight. Not as a distraught parent looking for answers, but as a suspect, a man surrounded by evidence, compelled to assist. Handlers pulled the dogs back and redirected them as they circled, their noses pressed against the ground. With the sun shining on a scene that shouldn't have happened, investigators marked the ground. Parents should never lead police to a baby's grave. The man who was meant to protect a child should not decide where that child will eventually rest. And the straightforward query that troubled everyone in attendance was, why now? Why did you only choose to assist when the burden of the law was pressing down on you? A true parent would have done everything in their power to keep him alive. Instead of walking detectives to the end of his brief life, a true father would have carried his son home. That field silence was more potent than any testimony given in a court of law. The sound of the dogs digging, the clinking of Jake's chains, and the markers buried in the ground all served as reminders that Emmanuel's voice had been lost forever due to the treachery of the two individuals who were supposed to be his protectors. Once sympathetic, the country was now angry. Instead of protecting their child's crib, what kind of parents lead strangers to their child's grave? What sort of mother tells falsehoods as her child disappears into the world? What kind of father doesn't do anything until the police drag him out in chains? Emmanuel's fate was sealed when he was never allowed to select his parents. The tremors extended well beyond Yucaipa. What started as a mother's frantic request on local television stations had now made headlines nationwide. Cable news networks examined every detail. Crime reporters replayed Rebecca's emotional interviews. Outrage raged on social media. Emmanuel's name, once a beacon of hope, now functioned as a memorial hashtag, a stark reminder of the overwhelming treachery. The community felt doubly wounded, still reeling from the initial fear of a fictitious kidnapping. They had written Emmanuel's name on posters, held candlelight vigils, and prayed for his safe return. It was a betrayal to light those candles and shed tears for a false purpose. Anger replaced sympathy. Those who had previously gathered to support Rebecca now demanded justice for her. Forgiveness did not exist in the courtroom of public opinion. Mothers questioned out loud how someone could hold a baby 1 minute and then erase him the next. Fathers clenched their fists, unable to imagine Jake leading detectives across open fields while chained. Once hopeful messages or meal deliveries from neighbors now whispered the unthinkable: Emmanuel would never return home. And his parents had made sure of it. In the meantime, another silent tragedy unfolded behind the headlines. The state took custody of Emmanuel's 2-year-old sister after she was taken from the family. Instead of growing up next to her brother, she would be raised in the shadow of his absence, saved from what could have been another name in the news stories of the future. It is impossible to quantify the weight of what she will eventually discover about her parents. One fact, however, is still intolerable: Emmanuel's small body has not been located. They have turned the soil. Dogs have looked. Investigators have marked the earth. However, his remains have not yet been found in any grave. Every parent who hears his name is haunted by the lack of closure, since it is impossible to bury Emmanuel because his parents have abandoned him, even in death. The outrage has expanded beyond Emmanuel's treatment. It is about what it shows about the frailty of innocence and how easily it can be shattered when the hands that are supposed to protect turn out to be the ones that betray. There is more to this case than the loss of one baby. It is about everything we are taught to believe in from the time we are born, collapsing. A child's womb is supposed to be a haven, the first and safest place they will ever call home. A baby relies solely on that warmth, that heartbeat, and that assurance of safety for 9 months. And when a child is finally brought into the world, they are supposed to sleep in a father's arms, an unbreakable, impenetrable fortress designed to protect them from all threats outside. What remains, though, when those barriers fall, when those sworn by biology and love to defend instead turn into the ones causing harm? What does the term family mean? For 7 months. Emmanuel Haro was only given that amount of time. He cried quietly in the middle of the night for 7 months, reached out with small hands, and relied on the 2 people who should have been his lifeline. He lacked the words and voice to ask for assistance outside of his house. He had no opportunity to explain what was happening to the world. His tiny body hasn't been located as of yet. He is denied dignity even in death. This tale compels us to face an almost intolerable reality. Betrayal does not always appear as a stranger in the dark. It doesn't always originate externally. Sometimes, the weight of betrayal wears a parent's face. The betrayal is complete when it occasionally whispers in the recognizable voice of mom or dad. For Emmanuel, communities lit candles. Strangers prayed for his safe return. Families held vigils, believing that an unidentified person had taken Emmanuel. People flooded his parents' story with love, hope, and sympathy. And his life may have been put out by those very parents all along. The outrage extends beyond the actions taken. It is about the lies that ensued, the black eyes captured on camera, the tale of a stranger saying hola, the mother's insistence that she would never give up, and the father leading detectives through the dirt while chained, leading them to the exact spot where his child might be concealed. Every action, statement, and tear, now tarnished by uncertainty and dishonesty. Therefore, as a society, we are left with the question that remains long after the headlines have faded. What hope is left for the children who cannot even speak to defend themselves if the very people who create life can so easily take it away? If there is one lesson to be learned from Emmanuel's brief life, it is that sometimes the hands that children reach for in times of fear pose a greater threat than strangers. You already know why we can't turn away if this story makes you uneasy or evokes a strong emotion. While Emmanuel's voice has been permanently silenced, ours has not. By ignoring this situation and moving on too quickly, we contribute to the silence that allows it to happen. Every development in this case is significant because, beneath the lies, the conflicting accounts, and the courtroom declarations, there is only one undiscovered truth: the world deserves answers, and a baby's brief life deserves justice. We kindly request that you do more than simply observe and leave. Continue reading this story. Join Emmanuel. To ensure you don't miss the next update, subscribe to this channel and enable notifications. The battle for the truth continues even after the cameras stop rolling. Only when accountability is provided does it come to an end. Too many children are overlooked. Once the headlines fade, far too many cases fall into the background. We must not allow Emmanuel's memory to be forgotten. You convey the message that children are not expendable, their lives are not forgettable, and their stories cannot be overlooked by remaining informed and by continuing to pursue this case. Despite Emmanuel's inability to speak for himself, we have the power to ensure his legacy endures. If you click subscribe, activate the notification bell, and stay with us as we follow every new development, we can help keep his memory alive.